Did you know the name Ohio comes from the Iroquois word Ohio? It translates as Great River. People have lived in the land of modern Ohio for thousands of years, and archaeologists called them Paleo-Indians. It's a generic term, but they built a complex society, showed clearly in the earthen mounds they used for burials, ceremonies, and possibly defense. They traded with many other tribes, but eventually faded, leaving room for other Native American tribes to move west into the land. After the American Revolution, as part of the Northwest Territory, Ohio was filled with promise. The land was suitable for farming, and people rushed into it, determined to create a new life for themselves. That determination still rings true in Ohio today. Although much of the state is still dedicated to farming, the people and their history represent the drive of the American Midwest, showing how people can change the world with perseverance and industry. How did Ohio begin? The first people in Ohio were the Native Americans, but the European fur traders soon ventured across the Appalachian Mountains to trade with them. The American squatters quickly followed the Europeans, even though they technically weren't supposed to encroach on Native American lands. Historians do not consider them official settlers. The Confederation Congress, which ruled America from 1781 until 1789, passed an ordinance for the government of the territory of the United States northwest of the River Ohio in 1787. Most people call this the Northwest Ordinance. America had won the Northwest Territory after the American Revolution, so the government used the Northwest Ordinance to split the land into 5 states, prohibit slavery, and sell the land to settlers. However, the settlers quickly discovered they were not alone in their home in Ohio. The Native Americans did not intend to give up their land. Although the settlers attempted to maintain peace with the Native Americans, tensions rose. By 1789, hostilities had mounted to undeclared warfare. In 1789, the United States built Fort Washington in southwest Ohio, near the town of Losanaville. General Arthur St. Clair renamed it Cincinnati, but as the city grew, he was forced to relocate his troops in 1791 to a new fort, Fort Hamilton. While this removed the untrained soldiers from distractions like taverns and brothels, it did not give them an upper hand against the Native Americans. Led by Little Turtle and Blue Jacket, the Native Americans attacked on November 4, 1791. They launched a surprise attack and wholly routed St. Clair's forces, leaving 623 dead and 258 injured. Their success was so complete, this battle became known as St. Clair's defeat. George Washington made him resign in 1792, and President Thomas Jefferson removed him from the governorship shortly afterward. The Native Americans were more determined than ever to remove the settlers from their lands, even forming alliances with the British. However, the United States began significant investments into the Northwest Territories Army. They appointed General Anthony Wayne as the new commander in 1792, and he established Legionville to train new soldiers for combat. General Wayne was determined to remove the Native Americans from Ohio and force them to respect the American government. Once he thought the troops were trained enough, General Wayne marched to the Ohio River. The Native Americans wanted to set a border at the river. No Americans should be allowed to cross it. While the British supported that plan, Wayne disagreed and continued to push north and west. Open hostilities finally began in June 1794, when the Native American troops successfully attacked a pack train only 200 yards from Fort Recovery. They could not take the fort, though, and when the Native Americans called on the British to assist them, the British decided not to involve themselves. Wayne continued pushing the Native Americans west, finally meeting again at the Battle of Fallen Timbers on August 20, 1794. The battle only lasted about an hour, and the Native Americans eventually retreated, running for the British Fort Miami, which did not admit them. They realized the British really would not support them, and they were not strong enough to defeat Wayne's army. In February 1795, the Native Americans agreed to meet with Wayne and discuss peace terms. They signed the Treaty of Greenville in August 1795. It gave the land of modern-day Ohio to the American settlers, and the Native Americans moved west into modern-day Indiana. People now poured into Ohio, caught up in Ohio fever. Everyone wanted their chance to get wealthy, and Ohio's wealth came from the land, which was suitable for farming, mills, and docks. It had rich natural resources, and the Ohio River opened up the area for shipbuilding. This new industry used the natural timber in the area to construct riverboats that sailed down the Ohio and Mississippi rivers, eventually arriving in New Orleans and the Gulf of Mexico. People continued to pour in, and towns began to prosper, even though many of the first Ohioans still lived on farms, raising crops like corn and apples and animals like pigs. When Thomas Jefferson became president, he was determined to make Ohio a state, partially to increase support for the Democratic Republicans. Although they did not yet have 60,000 people, Ohio became the 17th state on February 19, 1803. Ohio celebrates its statehood on March 1st, though, because this was the first day the Ohio State Legislature met. Ohio continued to grow from here, starting Ohio University and fighting with the Native Americans for land. However, one of Ohio's most substantial contributions to American history was its industry. How did Ohio's industry grow? Ohio's industry did not grow in a straight line, nor was it always successful. For example, it flourished during the War of 1812, when the United States Army needed Ohioan goods like rope and food. But after the war ended, the demand decreased, causing the Panic of 1819. The economic crisis centered around paying debt and struggling with the Bank of the United States. Without a war to support them, the people of Ohio had to turn to other projects to generate revenue. In the 1820s and 1830s, their chief focus was the Ohio and Erie Canal. The Erie Canal connects Lake Erie to New York, and the Ohio and Erie Canal once linked Lake Erie to the Ohio River, creating a thoroughfare and boosting Ohio's industry. Although it took about 8 years to complete, the Erie Canal opened Ohio up to the East Coast, which brought goods like grain, pork, cheese, and whiskey. By 1830, Ohio had the fourth largest population in the United States. Cincinnati was also the first Western city to be included in the 10 largest cities in America. Cincinnati was built on the pork industry, usually completed in the fall and winter when the pork products wouldn't spoil as quickly. As the country's pork center, Cincinnati quickly grew populous and wealthy. It had brick buildings, wide roads, and numerous walking paths and gardens. Some even called it the Paris of the West. New fashions and philosophies flowed from the East Coast and found a home in Cincinnati. Ohio was no longer the frontier of America, and the introduction of the Erie and Kalamazoo Railroad line only pushed industry even farther as rail lines began crisscrossing the state. The first line to cross out of the state was the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, connecting Ohio to the East Coast even more securely. Ohio played an essential part in the Civil War and the Underground Railroad, but after the war ended in 1865, Ohio was the country's manufacturing and industrial center. They had built their first oil refinery in 1861. The oil industry grew partially thanks to the efforts of John Davison Rockefeller. He started working in oil in 1863 and began his business, Standard Oil, in 1870. By 1872, he had bought all but 4 Cleveland competitors. He used his business skills and strong-handed approaches to create a monopoly, becoming one of the wealthiest people in American history. Rockefeller also donated money to various Cleveland organizations and land for public parks. Ohio also invested in other industries, becoming a leading producer of wagons, carriages, shoes, paper, boxcars, and iron. In 1869, Akron convinced Benjamin Franklin Goodrich to move his rubber factory to their new city. He eventually helped found Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company in 1898, and Akron quickly became the rubber capital of the world as the demand for rubber increased. Ohio soon became home to other companies like Procter & Gamble. They made a wide range of products, although they started with ivory soap, and soon added to the state's growing industry. How is Ohio's history continuing to change today? Ohio has always been more than a frontier or economic powerhouse. It has also made significant political contributions to the United States. 8 presidents have come from Ohio, giving Ohio the largest percentage of presidents in the country. However, Ohio's contributions are not limited to the past, and it continues to play a significant role in American politics and modern society. Ohio was deeply involved in the civil rights movement for women and African Americans. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, women became increasingly engaged in political and social matters, arguing for the temperance movement and supporting women's suffrage. As early as 1916, Ohioan cities gave women the right to vote, a few years before Congress passed the 19th Amendment. The racial tensions in Ohio were not as quickly or adeptly handled. The NAACP was part of Ohio politics from its beginning, trying to remove corrupt police officials and protect African American soldiers from discriminations in places like Camp Sherman, a primary training site during World War I. Around the same time, African Americans began moving north, drawn to factory work to better themselves. This was called the Great Migration, and one of the cities that saw a significant rise in the African American population was Springfield, Ohio. Many white people thought they were superior to the African Americans. Hate groups, such as the Ku Klux Klan, were popular in Ohio and Indiana, sometimes even more so than in southern states. In addition, the economy slowed after World War I, and people suddenly competed in a tighter job market. Violence sprouted up as African Americans struggled to defend themselves against white mobs, and this violence continued for several years. Thankfully, it finally settled as integration became more prominent, allowing Carl B. Stokes to become the first African American mayor to govern a large city. He served Cleveland from 1967 to 1971. Ohio was home to several other modern heroes, such as Neil Armstrong, who changed the course of American history. He was born on August 5, 1930, and eventually joined NASA. While employed there, he became the first person on the moon in 1969. Later in life, Armstrong supported other programs dedicated to space travel and won several awards, such as the Congressional Space Medal of Honor. Sadly, Ohio's modern history is also filled with tragedies like the Kent State shooting. A group of students gathered on May 4, 1970, to protest the Vietnam War. This was not the first demonstration, and Kent's mayor had already called the Ohio National Guard. The soldiers attempted to disperse the crowd, but then fired on them, killing 4 and injuring 9. It shocked the nation, leaving people wondering about the sharp divisions in American politics. Today, Ohio is still full of political divisions. The Southwest leans Republican, the Northeast is Democrat, and the state's middle fluctuates. The state's industries and cities have changed as the global economy has stretched out, taking manufacturing jobs out of the states. However, Ohioans continue to unite over their shared history and their dedication to preserving it. Ohio has seen many different cultures come and go. Historical buildings and landmarks are now protected, allowing people to look into the past, see what Ohio has been, and maybe catch a glimpse of what Ohio will become. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about Ohio, check out our book, History of Ohio, a captivating guide to the people and events that shaped the history of the Buckeye State. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.